All right, so today we're going to tackle something pretty fundamental to
Yeah.
family life.
Yeah.
We're talking about understanding your child's brain.
Absolutely.
We've been deep diving into The Whole Brain Child by Daniel J. Siegel
Mm.
and Tina Payne Bryson.
Yeah, great book.
And in this deep dive, we want to pull out those ideas that can give you like a shortcut
Mm-hmm.
to understanding how your kid's mind is actually developing and how that
Right.
impacts their behavior.
Kind
And
of
then to
thing
give you
there.
some tools to work with that.
Absolutely.
So the
The
goal
goal is
will
like
be
happier kids, but like healthier,
healthier, more resilient.
more resilient.
Yeah. I think the thing that I like so much about the approach in this book is that it takes those moments that we all experience as parents that are the toughest, the tantrums, the big emotions, and it says those aren't just things to get through. Those are actually opportunities
Oh,
to help your child's brain integrate
wow.
and grow.
That's fascinating. Yeah, so the central idea here is integration. How the different parts of the brain learn to work together in a balanced way.
So for me, the listener understanding the idea of integration can be a total game changer in how you respond to your kid in those moments.
Yeah.
And so we're going to kind of break it down into some practical areas. Like first,
Right.
how the logical left brain and the emotional right brain can connect and communicate.
Yeah.
Then we'll look at the upstairs brain, which is like the reasoning part,
Mm-hmm.
and the downstairs brain, which is more instinctual and emotional, and how those two link up.
Right.
We'll also uncover how memory plays into all of this, both the memories that your child like consciously remembers
Right.
and the ones that are working kind of behind the scenes.
Right. Those implicit memories.
Yes, exactly. Plus, we'll delve into developing mindsight, that like crucial self-awareness.
Right.
And then finally, we'll touch on the me-we connection,
Mm-hmm.
how your child learns to balance their own needs
Yeah.
with being able to connect with others.
Yeah. The book starts with this story that I think is really powerful.
Okay.
That really illustrates this idea of brain integration.
Okay.
It's about a mom named Mariana and her son Marco. He was 2 years old at the time,
Okay.
and they were in a car accident. He was with his babysitter,
Oh, wow.
and she had a seizure while driving.
Oh, my gosh.
So very scary.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Marco wasn't hurt, but obviously a traumatic experience for a little guy.
Yeah, for sure.
And what's so important here is that Mariana, because she understood these principles of brain integration, she didn't just dismiss it.
Right.
You know, she knew that Marco's young brain needed to process what had happened.
Okay, so how did she go about doing that?
So she did something really simple but powerful.
Yeah.
She would have him retell the story of what happened
Okay.
over and over again. And she would gently guide him, like, you know, you and Sophia were in an accident, weren't you? And he would even act out what happened with Sophia.
Oh.
And then the crucial part, she connected the details of the story with his emotions. So like acknowledging the scary parts.
Yeah.
The ee-a-woo-woo of the ambulance taking Sophia away.
Oh, wow. So just that act of
Right.
retelling the story was actually...
Was helping his brain make sense of this traumatic experience.
It wasn't just about remembering the sequence of events?
No, exactly. By having him revisit it and put it into a narrative, Mariana was helping his left brain, you know, that side that's starting to develop logic and language at that age, to understand and integrate the really strong emotional response coming from his right brain.
Right. So even though he couldn't articulate it, he was having those feelings.
Exactly. And, you know, this kind of integration is so important because it can help prevent those fears from becoming like overwhelming
Right.
or coming out in challenging behavior later on.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, it allows him to process the event in a healthy, balanced way, so it eventually just becomes another experience.
Okay, so let's dive a little deeper
Okay.
into this idea of the two sides of the brain. Yeah. So the book describes the left brain as being, you know, logical, literal, linguistic, linear. It's about order.
Yeah, order the specifics.
The specifics.
Yeah.
And then you have the right brain, which is more holistic, nonverbal,
Right.
emotional, experiential, and autobiographical.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the big picture, the gut feelings.
Yeah. So it's fascinating how these two hemispheres
Right.
often perceive the world in such different ways.
Yeah, they do.
The book illustrates this really well with the story of Thomas's daughter, Katie, who all of a sudden starts experiencing separation anxiety after getting sick at preschool.
Yeah, she'd been fine, you know, totally happy going to school,
Yeah.
saying goodbye to Dad in the mornings.
Right.
And then one day she got sick at school. Dad comes to pick her up.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on,
Like things change.
Everything changed. She's crying. She doesn't want to go to school.
Wow. So even though she's physically feeling better,
Yeah.
her right brain has made this connection that school equals...
Right? School equals feeling sick, equals dad leaves, equals anyhow.
Oh, wow.
So every time they approach the school, her right brain is just flooding her with these negative emotions.
Right.
And she's freaking out.
Yeah.
She's resisting. She's making herself heavy.
Oh, wow.
She's clinging to him.
Oh, gosh.
And at one point, she even says, I'll die if you leave me.
Wow. So her right brain is like totally...
Right. It's taken over.
Overwhelming her logical understanding that school is usually a safe and fun place.
Exactly.
So how did Thomas help Katie bridge that gap between those big feelings and her understanding?
Well, this is where this whole brain strategy comes in that we're going to talk about a lot today.
Okay.
Name it to tame it.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So the idea is that when your child is overwhelmed by these big right brain emotions like Katie's fear, helping them retell the story of what happened engages their left brain.
Oh.
You're bringing in logic language and a sense of order to those really intense feelings.
So in Katie's case, talking about getting sick at school, dad coming to get her and then feeling better, she could start to create a narrative that her left brain could understand.
Yeah, it wasn't just this big, overwhelming feeling of fear.
Right.
It became, a sequence of events with a beginning, middle, and end.
And I think that's really important for the listener to understand, too, that often as adults, we want to jump in and solve the problem or dismiss the feeling.
Right, just get over it.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's more about...
Right, and the book talks about this idea of connect before you redirect.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Connect before you redirect.
So when your kid is having these big emotions like Katie was, you can't reason with them.
Right.
In that moment, you need to first acknowledge their emotions.
Connect with them.
Connect with them.
Yeah.
And then gently guide them toward telling the story.
That makes so much sense because you can't really have a logical conversation with someone who feels like they're in danger.
Right, exactly. They're not in their upstairs brain.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I think it's also important to point out that it's not always about sitting a kid down for a serious talk.
No.
Like, kids are often much more open.
Yeah, they're much more likely to open up when they're playing, building with Legos.
Yeah.
Drawing a picture.
Or driving in the car.
Or in the car. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So look for those moments when they're a little more relaxed.
Yeah.
And if they don't want to talk to you, maybe encourage them to talk to like a trusted friend, another adult in their life, or even an older sibling.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the example in the book about Laura and her son, Jack, who had a bike accident.
Right. And it wasn't a serious accident.
Right.
But it was enough to make him really scared.
And
then he didn't want to get back on his bike.
Right.
So instead of just dismissing his fear, Laura patiently helped him recount the whole experience step by step.
Okay.
So they talked about exactly what happened, how he felt in that moment, and how it was resolved.
Right.
With a little comfort, a Band-Aid. And they also talked about, being more aware of uneven pavement.
Yeah.
Looking out for cars.
So that he had some control over it.
Exactly. It gave him a sense of agency.
Right.
So instead of feeling helpless,
he
felt like, okay, there are things I can do to be safer.
Right. And so she wasn't just telling him what to do, but she was...
Right. She was empowering him.
Yeah.
By letting him take an active role in telling the story.
And I love that idea of like putting words to the fear can actually help take away some of its power.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Name It to Tame It is all about. When we help our kids find the words to describe their pain, their fears, we're helping them tame those feelings. We're helping that integration happen between the left brain's ability to understand and the right brain's emotions.
Yeah.
And that ultimately builds resilience.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move up that mental staircase.
Okay.
And talk about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain.
So the book uses this great analogy.
Yeah, it's a great analogy.
The downstairs brain, which is the brainstem and the limbic region, it's located in the lower part of the brain. And it's primarily responsible for those basic survival functions, instincts and emotions.
Yeah, the fight, flight, freeze.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the upstairs brain, which is the cortex, is responsible for more complex, thoughtful functions.
Right.
That develop over time.
Yeah.
Like decision-making, planning ahead, having control over emotions,
Self-understand, empathy,
morality, yeah, all those higher level functions.
Yeah, and this is a good reminder for you, the listener, that those higher level functions of the upstairs brain
Right.
don't fully mature until our mid-20s.
Yeah.
So
Which is good to remember.
it's good to remember when
Yeah.
you're dealing with your kids.
Yeah. Because, the downstairs brain is pretty well developed, even at birth. But the upstairs brain is very much under construction throughout childhood and adolescence.
So like a house where the downstairs is totally done, but the upstairs is still being built?
Yeah. Maybe with scaffolding up.
Yeah.
Some rooms not quite finished.
Yeah.
And so kids will often find themselves, quote unquote, stuck downstairs.
Right.
Without full access to their reasoning and self-control.
So the amygdala is like a key player in that downstairs brain.
Yeah, the amygdala, it's like the brain's early warning system or smoke detector. It reacts very quickly to perceived threats.
Right.
Strong emotions.
So the book talks about flipping our lid.
Yeah.
Which I know happens to me sometimes.
Oh, yeah, it happens to all of us, adults and kids.
All right.
It's when the amygdala basically hijacks the upstairs brain.
Right.
During moments of intense emotion or stress. So those higher level rational functions, they're offline.
They're gone. So when you see your kid having a tantrum,
Right.
they're not
necessarily being manipulative.
Right.
They've genuinely lost access to their upstairs brain.
And I love how the book makes this distinction between upstairs tantrums and downstairs tantrums.
Yeah.
So an upstairs tantrum is more of a conscious choice where the kid is making a decision to have a fit
Right.
to get their way.
It's strategic.
Yeah. And they might seem really upset, but they could probably stop.
Right. They have some awareness.
If they chose to.
Yeah. And so in those moments, it's appropriate for you as a parent to set some firm boundaries.
Yeah.
And not give in to the demands.
Right.
But a downstairs tantrum, that's different.
Yeah.
The kid is truly overwhelmed.
Right.
The amygdala is taken over, and they're incapable of controlling their emotions or thinking logically.
They're flooded.
Yeah. So no matter how much you try to reason with them, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Right.
Well, the first step is to calm the amygdala.
Right.
To soothe them.
Yeah.
And try to steer them away from that emotional flooding.
So it's almost like you're co-regulating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're helping them regulate.
Yeah.
Because they can't do it themselves.
Right.
In that moment.
Yeah. And this connects to whole brain strategy number 3, which is engage, don't enrage.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Instead of, triggering that downstairs brain with commands, threats, or raised voices, the idea is to try to appeal to the upstairs brain.
Yeah.
By engaging their ability to think, to understand.
Yeah, problem solve.
Yeah, to potentially problem solve.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think Tina's story in the book about being in a restaurant with her son is a perfect illustration of this.
Yeah, so instead of immediately scolding him for, making faces being disruptive, she gets down to his level. She acknowledges his feelings. You look like you're feeling angry. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then she invites him to participate in finding a solution.
Right.
By negotiating with his dad.
Okay.
About his food.
So she's saying, like, what do you think would be a fair amount to eat before you can have dessert?
Exactly.
So she's engaging his upstairs brain.
Exactly. She's giving him a chance to think, to communicate his needs, to make a decision.
Instead of just reacting.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's so powerful.
Yeah, it turns what could have been a power struggle into a learning opportunity.
Right.
For him.
And that leads into whole brain strategy number 4, use it or lose it.
Yes.
Which means that you need to give your child lots of opportunities to exercise their upstairs brain.
Yeah.
So just like muscles get stronger with use,
exactly,
the more they use their upstairs brain abilities, the better they'll get at them.
And the stronger those connections will become.
Yeah. So give us some examples of what that looks like.
Okay. So for developing sound decision making, this involves offering choices to your children, even for younger ones.
Right.
And then as they get older, allowing them to grapple with dilemmas. And even experience the consequences of their decisions.
Within a safe space, obviously.
Right, of course, all within a safe and supportive framework.
Yeah.
But this helps them build those crucial executive functioning skills.
Right, right.
That ability to plan ahead, to think through consequences.
They're good choices.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
For fostering control over emotions and their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Help them practice healthy alternatives to lashing out
Yeah.
when they're overwhelmed.
When they flip their lid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Build that capacity for self-regulation.
So important.
Yeah.
For nurturing self-understanding,
Mm-hmm.
ask those why questions.
Yeah.
Like, why do you think you made that choice?
Exactly.
What made you feel that way?
Right.
Encourage them to look beyond the surface
Mm-hmm.
of their actions
Mhm.
and their feelings. I remember the example of the father helping Catherine prepare for summer camp
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
by asking her
Yeah.
how she thought she might handle feeling homesick,
Exactly.
which is brilliant.
Yeah, so he's not telling her what to do.
Right.
He's helping her think through it herself.
And that act of just asking the question
Right.
is so powerful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And then there's empathy,
Mm-hmm.
which you can develop by regularly discussing different people's feelings
Right.
and even doing some role playing.
Role playing, yeah.
Yeah, put yourselves in other people's shoes.
Yeah.
And then morality.
Mm-hmm.
Raise ethical questions.
Right.
Use hypothetical situations to encourage them to think about right and wrong
Yeah.
and the impact of their actions on others.
I love the example of Liam running outside
Oh, yeah.
when he felt overwhelmed by his homework.
Yeah,
Like, even though he didn't know it,
right.
he was helping himself.
He was integrating his brain.
Yeah.
He was calming that amygdala.
Yeah.
And afterwards, he could actually come back and focus.
Right. So move it or lose it
Exactly.
is not just for adults.
Right. The body can really help the brain
Mm-hmm.
to regulate
Yeah.
and to integrate.
And I think it's important to point out that, as parents,
Oh, yeah.
we flip our lids too.
All the time.
Right. And so,
So the book really emphasizes modeling self-regulation.
yes.
Remembering that principle first, do no harm
Right.
in those highly charged moments.
Yeah,
Because we're all going to lose it sometimes.
we are.
But how can we repair?
Right.
How can we model?
Model it for our kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is memory.
Yeah.
And the book has a really interesting perspective
Mm-hmm.
on memory.
Yeah, it challenges that common idea that memory is like a file cabinet,
Right.
where you can just pull out specific recollections.
Yeah.
Instead, it describes memory as being fundamentally about associations. So how our brain is constantly linking our present experiences with similar ones from the past.
Oh, wow.
And this ongoing process actually physically changes the structure of the brain
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
through, strengthening of those neural connections.
So neurons that fire together wire together.
Exactly.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and what's really crucial here is to understand the two main types of memory,
Okay.
implicit and explicit.
Okay.
So implicit memory,
Mm-hmm.
that's the unconscious influence of our past experiences on our present behavior.
So like how you can tie your shoes without even thinking about it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Or change a diaper
Yeah.
without consciously thinking about the steps.
Right.
Or it might be that underlying feeling of familiarity or unease that you experience
Mm-hmm.
without being able to pinpoint why,
Right.
those gut feelings.
Right.
And then explicit memory, that's what we typically think of as memory.
Okay.
It's the conscious recollection of past events. The things you can actually remember and describe.
The things you can talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
The book shares an anecdote about one of the authors, Dan,
Okay.
and how his newborn children
Mm-hmm.
seemed to recognize his voice,
Ah.
and even a Russian lullaby that was played during pregnancy,
Wow.
which are powerful examples of implicit memories formed even before birth.
Wow. So we're forming memories
Right.
way before we
Even in the womb.
can even speak.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And so these implicit memories,
Yeah.
they can have such a profound impact.
Yeah, particularly in those early years.
Yeah.
Because they're formed through our perceptions, our emotions, our bodily sensations,
Right.
and they can really influence how we react to things later in life,
Even if we don't remember.
even if we don't remember
Yeah.
the original experience.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
And this brings us back to name it to tame it,
Yeah.
but this time with a focus on integrating those implicit memories that are related to negative experiences.
Exactly.
Like
But a great example of this
Yeah.
is Tina's conversation with her son about his reluctance to go to swimming lessons.
Okay.
He didn't consciously remember a specific negative experience from his lessons,
Mm-hmm.
but he had all these butterflies in his stomach. He was
Yeah.
resistant.
Yeah.
And so Tina gently helped him to name those feelings
Yeah.
and to connect them back to the past experience
Right.
he'd had with those stricter swim teachers
Mm-hmm.
and, the feeling of being dunked underwater.
Yeah.
And so by talking about it, by bringing that implicit memory into his conscious awareness.
So making it explicit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She was helping his hippocampus.
Okay, the hippocampus.
Yeah, it's a key structure in the brain.
Okay.
You can think of it as the brain's search engine
Oh, okay.
for memory retrieval.
Okay.
So it helps connect those scattered and fragmented implicit memories
Right.
into a coherent and understandable explicit narrative
So it's like it's helping us make sense. Yeah.
of those feelings and sensations that are bubbling up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by forming that explicit memory,
Hmm.
we can understand why we're feeling a certain way in the present.
That's really powerful.
Yeah, it is.
I remember David's story about his son, Eli,
Yeah.
who had this intense fear of woodworking tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After a minor knife accident.
Yeah. And he didn't connect the two?
No,
Honestly.
he didn't, but it was definitely influencing his behavior.
Yeah.
So David very gently guided Eli to revisit that memory,
Okay.
to kind of watch a DVD of the event in his mind.
Wow.
And, by making it explicit,
Hmm.
Eli could begin to process his fear
Right.
in a more direct way, and it no longer held that kind of mysterious power over him.
And the book gives some really great advice on how to
Mhm.
do this, like with your kids.
Yeah, they suggest like fun games,
Hmm.
like 2 truths and a lie
Yeah.
when you pick them up from school,
Hmm.
just to kind of get them reflecting.
On their day.
Yeah.
And it also raises this point about
Yeah.
how our own unexamined implicit memories
Right,
as parents
right.
can sometimes impact our interactions with our kids.
Yeah, negatively.
Yeah.
So it's really important for us.
To do our own work.
Yeah.
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 To look at our own implicit memories and how they might be
Triggering us.
triggering us
Yeah.
and affecting our parenting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's shift our focus to mindsight, which the book describes as the ability to understand our own mind and the mind of another.
Right.
And we'll start with self-understanding.
Right.
Using Dan Siegel's Wheel of Awareness.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to us?
Yeah. So the Wheel of Awareness is a visual model
Okay.
that helps us understand the different aspects of our inner experience.
Okay.
So imagine a wheel with a central hub in the middle
Mm-hmm.
and a rim that goes all the way around.
Okay.
The hub represents your awareness itself,
Okay.
that knowing,
Mm-hmm.
and the rim represents all the different things that you can become aware of.
Okay.
Your sensations, your images, your feelings, your thoughts.
So for me, the listener, the idea is that from that central hub of awareness,
Right.
you have the ability to choose
Exactly.
what you focus on that rim.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think Amber's story in the book
Mhm.
about her son Josh
Yeah.
and his perfectionism
Mhm.
really illustrates this.
Yeah. Josh was so focused on his anxious thoughts about not being good enough.
Right. Yeah.
Those thoughts were just a few points on the rim of his awareness.
Right.
And he wasn't paying attention to all the other parts of himself.
Right.
Like his talents, his desire to have fun.
Right.
So Tina helped him to see that those anxious thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
while they were real,
Yeah.
weren't the entirety of who he was.
Right.
They were just one part
One part.
of his experience.
Yeah.
And he had the power to choose how much attention he gave to them.
So he could choose to focus on something else.
Exactly. And the book talks about getting stuck on the rim,
Right.
which can lead to either rigidity,
Okay.
where you're just fixated on one thing,
Mm-hmm.
or chaos,
Right.
where your attention is scattered all over the place.
Yeah, and so the Wheel of Awareness helps us see that we have choices
Exactly.
about where we direct our attention.
And that's not just a mental exercise.
Right?
That actually impacts the brain.
Really?
Yeah, through neuroplasticity.
Explain that.
So neuroplasticity is the idea that our brain is constantly changing in response to our experiences.
Okay.
So new experiences, new learning
Right.
actually create new connections in the brain.
Wow. So by focusing our attention, we can actually change our